This fly is a swing fly that I developed probably in the early years, 2000s. I still fish it today, and it's one of my confidence flies, and this is called the Firecracker Leech. A lot of people, fishing the swing, especially if they show up with their own flies, I'll get that question of what do I put on? And I always tell people when you're swinging flies, put that fly on that you have the most confidence fishing, if you've caught fish on it before, and, give you the confidence to fish it knowing that, you might get a fish in the first or second run of the day, or maybe by the end of the day. But it's a fly I developed, has a lot of movement, it's got a lot of flash for their attention, and it's just overall one of my top steelhead flies, and I'm sure everybody's heard me talk about it on my fish reports and whatnot. And I love to tie this fly and use it in purple, especially in the winter months when the light is really low and you have these cloudy days where we just never seem to see sunshine up here in northwest Michigan, and you get snow on the banks, and when you get that real cloudy type weather, it kind of even makes, the water could be clear, but it even makes it look darker because of the darker hue in the sky. So I love to fish purple. So to start this fly, we're going to use, I'm going to tie it shank style. You can tie it on an iron hook too. I used to for many years. 2461, like a size 1 would work really well. I'm going to tie it today on a shank. This is just a 35 millimeter shank, and we're going to use, once again, heavy thread, ultra thread 140. And tying shank flies, you really got to make sure you do get a good thread wrap. And you'll find you really want to wrap around this. This part of a shank can be very, very sharp, and it will cut your thread within an instant if you're not careful. So you just got to really watch that, and I'll show you how to start. We're just going to start right behind the eye, give a little bit of play, usually like a little bit of a 1/4 of an inch. But I'm going to wrap this a lot. You'll find when you tie swing flies, you go through a lot of thread, but that's what you want to do. I'm just going to wrap this all the way around and make a bunch of thread wraps, because in the end I don't want to cut my thread on that little piece. Now some guys use wire for their stinger hook. I prefer like using Power Pro. This is just 40-pound test Power Pro. I like it because it's a little stiffer than just regular braid. And what I do is I'll cut, I usually want like a good 8-inch piece of it, 6 to 8 inches of it. And then what I do is I'll take it and I fold it over, and then I will take the braid and I make a knot. And usually I measure it on this vise. I use a peak vise, and what I'll do is I'll run it through first, through the eye of the shank. And usually I like to stop it for my length right about here at where my vise comes off, right here where the jaws are. So then I kind of take it, and right about halfway, I'll make just an overhand knot in it. So when we tie this in, it'll keep that from slipping when a fish does grab it. And the other trick I like to do is I'll put it in, and now I'll bring it back to like where I was showing you, right on the edge of my pedestal, right where the jaws come out. And I lay it flat right on top, and I'll make a wrap. Now you can see I had that knot in here, so I'll make a bunch of wraps. And you can do, like, I'll use a clear glue, UV glue, but then I come to the front, and then this I'm just gonna wrap it right around the front of the shank, right through the eye, and I go right over it, and I just keep wrapping. Like so. If I got a little bit extra, I'll just fold it over. So I'm wrapping this down a lot. So when that steelhead goes to grab that hook, I have the reassurance that I know that it's not going to pull out. And at this point, you could do a couple just overhand whip finishes like so. You could put glue on it. That's what I'm doing. And then I'm going to work my thread right back to the end. For the tail of this fly, I like to use rabbit. I'm a big fan of rabbit and marabou when it comes to swing flies. There's a lot of cool synthetic stuff out there, but I really love rabbit and marabou. I think it moves a lot in the water. It gives you that excess weight to get your fly down when it gets wet. It becomes a little heavier. So for the tail, what I'm going to do is when I tie this rabbit on, you can see if I pull it, it's all, the fibers are all working to the left, so it's almost like tapered, and that's how I want to tie it on. And it's just this is just purple hairline rabbit strip. And what I'm going to do is I kind of measure it off from the eye of that shank to the back of the shank, and that's how long I want my tail to be. I don't want to overdo it and make it too long. I just want that hook to offset right behind it, so it's not following that stinger hook when you're casting it or it's fishing. So I just lay it on top, and I'm just going to make some pretty good tight wraps on it, because rabbit will spin a lot. That's comes to the point of getting a lot of thread on it. Good thread wrap on your shank, because we don't want that rabbit to spin. And then I'm just going to snip it off. Just like so. And then for the body of this fly, I'm going to add two things to it. So this is the copper UV. You can see it has some copper and some pearl and it almost looks like a little purple hue to it through that pearl flash on it. I'm a big fan of copper in a lot of our rivers for steelhead, especially when the river gets kind of that tea stain look to it. You can't beat copper for steelhead. They just love it, and so do trout. Anytime the rivers have that nice tea stain, and the PM when the water comes up is known to have that, where it almost has that tannic stain like a river up in the Upper Peninsula. And that's where this copper hue, I really have a lot of confidence putting it on flies. So same thing, I'm just going to tie this off by the tip, but I want those fibers, you can see how they're kind of basically laying down towards the left, just like the same way that rabbit is tied on. So I'm just going to give it some good wraps right at the end here. Just like that, and then I'm just going to let it hang over. And then the next step, it's pretty simple. Really this fly is pretty easy. We're basically making a woolly bugger in that sort of sense. So I'm going to use some purple schlappen, but I want to get a pretty good webby piece of it, like a big piece. You can see schlappen's more of a soft hackle. It's different than like dry fly hackle. It's not as stiff. It's very thick, webby, so it'll give you a lot of movement to your fly. Just like that. And then what I want to do is I'm going to tie this in tip first, right next to that UV chenille. And then I'm going to work my thread wrap just a little bit over halfway of that shank. Just like that. Now I've tried wrapping this together in the past, but it's just very difficult. So what I find is what I'm going to do is we're going to start palmering the UV chenille first. And we're just going to palmer it and kind of work it with our fingers towards the eye of the shank. just like so. And pull on it tight, because you want it nice and tight on that shank. If you don't pull on it tight enough and cinch it off, it's just gonna almost like free spool on itself. Just like that, and then I'll even give it a few wraps, kind of tuck it back. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this schlappen feather and slowly palmer it in between the UV chenille. It just takes a little bit to get it started, but just to give it that little bit of movement, and that purple will kind of come out upon the copper and the pearl. And you can see I just kind of pull it with my fingers. And I'll go all the way until I get these almost like marabou kind of fibers right at the front. And then I'll tie it off. So pretty simple. It's almost like tying a woolly booger at this point. And then I just take it and I'll fluff it all up. So I got that little bit of flash still coming in between the feather. And then I'll pull it back. And then next for the overwing, you can play around with this. I just put some pearl flashabou on it. Purple and pearl works good. Silver and purple. Or the flashabou that is blue, silver, and purple works very good too. But I just kind of, you got a lot of flash in the body, so I'm just gonna basically, like a matchstick's width, I'm gonna lay that on top, and I don't want it to go past the rabbit. I'm just laying it so it's about even with that rabbit strip. And I'm just gonna cinch it down. Just nice big wraps. You just get a nice little bit of flash in there. Now if you wanted more flash, you could pull this back and tie it off again to add even more. I'm just gonna go a little bit little because I'm fishing this in the winter. So more than likely the water's not too stained. There's a lot of snow on the banks. The water temp's probably in the 30s, 34. And then the next step I love, as most people know, I love putting barred wood duck onto my streamer flies. I think it gives it even a little bit more added movement to the fly. So what I'm gonna do, because I'm using this just to finish the fly off, like you've seen in the past where like the luscious leech, I'll strip one side, but for this, I'm just gonna add more because I'm finishing it off as a collar. So I'm just gonna tie it in, shiny side up, dull side down, right by the tip. Cut the tip off. I'm gonna work to the front. And now what I'm gonna do is just kind of palmer this and just kind of work those feathers out with my fingers as I'm going forward. And even when you're done, you can kind of separate, because this barred wood duck, it's a pretty thick feather on itself. So just about a couple wraps. I don't want to go into the short fibers. And then you really want to pull it tight and cinch it down, because same thing, it can just like free spool, and everything you just did can just like unravel itself within seconds. And then I'm going to cut it off at the stem. And just take like whatever's excess here, and I'm just going to fold it back. And I'm going to tie back again because I'm going to add my hot spot or my egg head. As you see, I fish a lot of egg sucking style leeches on this river, and it's because they work. They work great. Just having that hot spot, I think, gets their attention, and then having that thicker head, you know, like a Western style, you could finish this fly off right now and have a pretty cool fly that's going to catch steelhead. But here in the Great Lakes, I think by having that wider head, whether it's a sculpin or even a leech fly, it just gives that fly a lot of kickback as soon as it hits the bank, you know, or as soon as you fish it and it's hitting the water and it starts to sink, it's going to push water. And sometimes I think that does get their attention because our fish do like to sit next to the wood, tight to the banks. So for the head on this, I'm just going to use chartreuse ice dub to finish it off. And we're going to get a pretty good chunk of it, like a Sharpie marker thickness, like so. And then what I'm going to do is move my thread kind of right here in the middle, and I'm going to take this ice dub, and it's almost like tying an egg fly with yarn. I'm just going to put it right over that shank and pinch it so all the fibers are all the way around it. And then I'm going to make 2 or 3 really good tight wraps on it. Like so. And then you can kind of, once you finish that, kind of pull it, and I'm going to trim it a little bit because I don't want it to overcrowd all these pretty feathers and everything, you know, all the movement I was trying to get out of this fly. But I want a nice enough head where, like I said, it's going to push some water, give it a little kickback. So yeah, you can see you can just pull this stuff, all the loose, and then you can use it again on the next fly. And I'll just trim even a little bit off because I don't want it to overcrowd everything. And then what I'm going to do is just take my fingers and I just kind of work it all the way around that shank and kind of pull it back. And then I'll finish it off. Just make a nice head, and you can put cement on it when you're done. And you can add weight to these flies, which is something I used to do a lot, but over the years we've had such low water that I find if I add weight to them, then I got to sit and tie a bunch of flies that, you know, now have to be unweighted because the water's so low and there's not much current. So over the years, for weight, I like to just slide one of these little bullet weights down on it if I need to add weight. This is the smallest they make them. They're 1/32 ounce, and they work great. It'll drop your fly down enough to get it down, and with your sink tip, you know, it'll work it perfect. You're not going to be like hanging up on the bottom constantly and getting stuck. And a quick whip finish. And voila. Cut the head down just a little bit. And there you go. That is the Firecracker Leech.
If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more of this type of content, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Good luck fishing.